We begin the current Daf Mesechtes Bava Kama Daf Gimel. Begin second line down at the top of the Amud, where the Gemara continues the conversation with the machlokes we mentioned in the previous Daf regarding the mazik of Eish. Even though again we were really in the middle of discussing Shem Regel, but our previous Mishnah was talking about the Kelim and the Gedi jumping off of the roof and breaking Kelim, which is Urche, which is Nezik Shalom. So we spoke about also a case of a dog taking a hot biscuit and going to a pile of grain, which also has a little bit regular over there, depending if you learn it's Sroiris or Orche, but be that as it may, then we spoke about that the rest of it is going to get burnt. So we got into the conversation regarding how you understand that if it's Isha, your fire is Mishum Chitzav, or is it Mishum Memainai? And the Gemara discusses then different ramifications of that machlokes. So Shir goes past Bekalzach and Cheskel, turn to the Daf Chaim, turn to today's Daf, should be a schus, V'achim Ben Yisrael, in Eretz Yisrael, and throughout the entire world. So discussing today's daf are, like we said, a continuation of the machlokes in Riyach and Mishlakish regarding the chiv of Eish. Is it because it's like your arrows, or is it because it's your money? And how that relates to the halacha of taman ba'eish. We know there's an exemption in regarding to fire, that you're not going to be liable when it's hidden. So how does that relate to the concept of isha misham chitza when it's your arrows? Because, and the Gemara actually from those questions will lead to the fact that Laman the Islam misham chitza, even according to Rabbi Yochanan, learns that your fire is because of your arrows. He actually ends up agreeing that the Gemara says that there is this element of also of your money. The halacha b'chuvil chavecha yuchayev chamisha dvarim, which actually will be the ramification between these two mandoam isha mishum chitzav mishum emaynai, is that there's nezek, damages, tsar, the pain, reap the deductibles, shevetz, the loss of work, and and the shame, and that's actually going to be only because of the mandam isha mishum chitzav, not mishum emaynai. Then the Gemara discusses the case of the Gemara of the Mishnah Hakelev Shanot L'Charara, which I mentioned a few times. He took the hot biscuit, B'Hal Chagadish, he went to the pile of grain. Achal Charara, he ate the biscuit, Vidlik Hagadish, and he lit up the pile of grain. Regarding the liability, which relates to the concept that Shein is only B'Shas HaNizik, the liability of having eaten something, which is the biscuit, is only in the victim's domain. The Gemara has an interesting question regarding Pipara. Do you say the mouth of the cow that eats someone else's stuff, is that kechatzer hanizik or kechatzer mazik dami? On the one hand, you could say he's in the victim's property, but on the other hand, you could say the mouth of the animal itself, where the damage is happening, is the chatzer of the mazik, because it's the mazik's cow and it's in his domain, because the mouth is the mazik's domain. So that's the Gemara's question: how you qualify the p of the para. But the Gemara says regarding one thing is clear regarding killing the animal. If it damages something and it's liable for death, you're not going to say that the mouth of the cow is going to be considered like the Chatza HaMazik to exempt the animal. So we begin the current Daf Chav Gimel, second line down at the top of the Amud. We had mentioned the previous Daf, the machlokes Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish. Rabbi Yochanan had said the Isha Mishum Chitzav. Eish is considered Niske Gufay, as if the person caused the damage directly, similar to one who shoots an arrow. He's liable because it's Kaychay. And as Rashi adds, Hidlik Bagachela Shein Shalai Chayiv. Even if you use someone else's coals to light the fire, it's Chayiv because the Eish is Chitzav, it's his arrow. Reish Lakish, however, said Isha Mishum Memainai. Eish is considered in this case Memainai, as if his property is causing damage to one shiur. Therefore, this Rashi said Tais disagrees, but Begachelish and the Shlei Potter, if you use someone else's coals, is Potter because the Eish was not Memainai. That was the machlokes of the previous Daf. That's what the Gemara continues. Amar Rava, he says Kashla Lekasha Le Ala Abaya. Says Abaya had the following difficulty. Lemanda Meisha Mishum Chitzav. According to Rabbi Yochanan, learns that the liability of fire is because it's your arrows. Tamun be'eish the potter achmana. This that we know, as the Gemara is going to explain later on in this Masechta, that when something is hidden regarding fire, you're going to be exempt. Heichim mishkachas law. How can you have such a case of being exempt? As Rashi explains, if someone would shoot an arrow and it would damage something that's hidden, you think you wouldn't be liable for the damages? But the Gemara tells us later on this parak Chavav Mabeis, Petza Tachas Patza, which a person is liable for shogig like a mason, like oinus like a rotzen. You're liable in all types of situations. So as Taisa explains, says if you say Isha Mishum Moinoi, so there's no wonder that you'd be patza by Taman, because even though all types of Niskim Momin as Karen and Shane and Regel are Chayva Taman, but we find by your mammon that's mazik, we find every mazik has a different halacha. Karen and Shane and Regel, they all have their own halachas. That this one has tam, this one is pater b'shas harabim. So you could say that, okay, that you'll be exempt by certain things, but the adma masik, the person doesn't differentiate, and you're always chayiv. So there's no svara to darshan isha mishum chitzav. So the Gemara wonders, how would the mandam ishim mishum understand this halacha of being putter by taman? Rashi brings an interesting other pshat that an arrow is always taman because arrows by default go inside and damage like that. It says leishamati, whatever. But upon them. So when you can have a case of being putter of taman be'esh? So it says the Gemara. So it said Rava v'nichale, and Abaya answered the question like this: we're talking about where the fire took a hold in a certain courtyard. Then after the fire took a hold in this courtyard, the wall of the courtyard fell down. Not because of the fire, because like Rashi explains, if it would be because of the fire that caused the wall to collapse, so then that would be part of Chitzav, that would be part of his arrows. No, unrelated, after the fire was already taking hold, the wall crumbled. Then it went and it burned up and it damaged in another courtyard. Oh, the Hasam Kalale Chitzav. There, your arrows have stopped. Meaning, when you had lit the fire, which was the shooting of the arrow, it wasn't fit to damage in the other courtyard. Your arrow stopped where the wall is. And when the walls collapse, now damages elsewhere, okay, so that you're not going to be chayiv for tamun because your arrow stopped. Meaning, else arrows, you should be chayiv on tamun because that's adam amazik. No, because the walls collapse, you're going to be pater on tamun. So you must say, if that's the case, let me go lonami. What does that have to do with tamun? Even if it was revealed produce in the other guy's field, kol lechitzav. You're telling me the mazik of Eish is mishum chitzav because your arrows, and that's just like an adam mazik type of an extension. So okay, so then my arrow stopped. So then I should be part even if it's not hidden. So the Gemara says, Ella, you're right. The Gemara concludes that laman de islam mishum chitzav according to Rabbi Yochanan that hold and said on the previous stop that your liability for mazik of Eish is because of your arrows. Isli nami mishum memoinai. He also holds that there's a liability of Eish because of your money. And that is where you cannot make the person liable because of his arrows. You could make him liable because of his money, and that's where he's going to be chayiv. So therefore, when it's what's revealed, even though your arrows are not there anymore, but yes, there would be a liability because of your money. Because, as the Gemara explains, he should have fenced in before the fire continued to the other property. He had time, and he could have rebuilt the fence. And he didn't make the fence. So though you cannot make him liable for the first fire because of his chitzav ended, his arrow stopped because there was a wall there, but you could hold him liable for the end because he didn't protect his coal to fence it in. Where the hostim over there, shayrehu, it's like his ox, and that he did not go ahead and close the door in front of his ox, and it goes in and it damages. So therefore, that's why it's you're going to be potter on tamen. Just like the mandam mishum, you could, like Taisa explained, that makes sense. You could have a certain halacha that's qualifying the mazik of Eish. But we said if it's chitza with your arrows, then there's no ptur on tamen. You're chayiv for everything when you're on the mazik. They said no. The case is that Rabbi Yochanan would agree that there is a mammon hamazik and no chitza, no arrows. When you had made the fire, there was a wall, so there's no arrows. Subsequently, the arrow stopped. Then you didn't fence in the wall. That's your mammon hamazik of your gachelis, of your fire, and it's for that you're going to be liable. So the Gemara wonders, now if you're telling me that Rabbi Yochanan holds the one who we quote him as saying that the fire is the arrows, he also holds of this halacha of mammon. So my benayu, what's the difference between them? So Rashi qualifies. What's the question? Taisa actually brings there's many examples. Actually, we could have said differences between Rabbi Yochanan and Shlakish. But Rashi explains. When the coal was the person's, what's the difference between Rabbi Yochanan that holds you chayiv because of two elements of chitzav and mamoneh, and Rish Lakish that holds you only liable for one because of mammon? Because obviously, when the coal is his, they also disagree. Why? Because we had previously said that according to Rabbi Yochanan, ishoy, the words were ishoy mishum chitzav. This whole sugi we were saying ishoy, his fire, not ish. Ish his fire because of ours. Obviously, that when it's his own fire, we also have the machlekes. Rabbi Yochanan had to tell us. Oh, that you can be chayv for chitzav. Who cares? You can be chayv as mamoina anyway, because it's your own fire. Because we could understand up until this point, which we had said a chiddush because of your arrows, and because we thought Rabbi Yochanan was saying, and not as your money. and because as Gemara previously explained, it cannot be mamayna because, like we said, mammon has substance here, the fire has no substance. So you can say a difference between them is that when it's his money and it's not his arrows. How so? Let's say when the wall collapses, where there's no more arrows. According to Mandama Rabbi Yochanan Misham Chitza Dafka, you would be potter, and according to Mandama Mishamon, you would be chayiv. But now that the Gemara is saying that both of them agree to the concept of Isha Misham Amayno, the Gemara wants to know. So my benai, what's the difference between Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish? That when it's his own fire, what would be the ramification? Why do I need Rabbi Yochanan's halacha of Misham Chitza? The difference between them is l'chayiv and barbar dvar, to make him liable for the extra 4 things, meaning according to one that holds that the fire is because of your arrows, you're going to be liable for these 4 things. So if, let's say, a person's fire burns the hand of a person, so the owner of the fire is going to be chayiv for 4 things: nezek, damages; tzara, the pain; riba, the deductibles; and it's the loss of work. Now Rashi points out boishes, which is the 5th one, for shame that you're not going to be chayiv, because the Gemara says at the end of the parak on the Chavzayim and Aleph, you're not liable for boishes, for shame, until you're intentional to shaming the person. But these 4 things you're going to be chayiv because it's a negligence, because you should have entertained that the wind is going to take it, as we said at the end of the parak, that if someone falls off the roof with a common wind, he's chayiv for 4 things, but he's going to be potter on boishes. So according to one that holds that it's because of your mammon, you're going to be potter, because this is only by a adam hamazik that's chayiv for these chamisha / arba dvarim. But if you hold isha mishum chitzav, according to Rabbi Yochanan, that's why it was important to let us know that it's also your arrows to be chayiv on these 4 things. Why would you not pay for boishes? Why? It's in the Torah. It's by where it talks about the people where or maybe that's where is it learned out? Yeah, if you remember where it's from, but it's the parsha of that person damaging another person. We'll see later on about the halacha boishes. Oh, right. There's a mavushav. Right. But al kapanim, but yeah, l'chayr there should be a tashlum and a boishes. Akol b'fiyam avayish v'mazbayish. But the Rashi points out that the truth is, and Taisus had also said this, to really have all the difference between them also of the case of the dog and the camel, where according to Manda'amah Shem Chitzav, you'd be chayiv because that it's your money, even though it's not your arrows, and your arrows, if it's not your money, Rabbi Yochanan holds you can be chayiv for either one. But according to Manda'amah, that doesn't hold of chitzav, you're going to be potter only if it's misachseches. Rashi is just pointing out a more of a cheshbon from the previous daf, that we had said that only if you're misachseches, that's like the makam of the gecheles, like we previously explained. So why is the Gemara saying dafka these 4 things? The nezik, tzar, riper, shebes is a difference. If there's also differences, as the Taisus pointed out from the previous daf, says Rashi, because the Gemara wants to tell us that even when the kol is his, it sounds like that it's going to be chilukim, or Rashi is because it's the milsa the shchiachi, whatever. But al kapanim, there seems to be there are other things, but we wanted to pick specifically this to say the difference in Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish. The halacha of the Mishnah that said that if the kelev, the dog, took the coal, the hot biscuit, and he went to the, it sounds like that the hot biscuit had some like coals on it, and he went to the pile of grain, and he eats the biscuit, and the grain burns up on fire. We said on the biscuit you have to pay nezik sham because that's shane, and al kodesh misham chatzi nezik you pay chatzi nezik. So now it's a little bit of a complicated, a more complex cheshbon gemara. So we said al chara misham mechulu on the biscuit you pay nezik shalom, on the kodesh chatzi nezik. Says the Gemara, man chayiv. When you said that there's a liability on the pile of grain to pay chatzi nezik, who is it that's paying the chatzi nezik? Remember, we had a machlekes about where on the pile of grain is chatzi nezik, where it depended on how you hold. We spoke about, is it the place of where it was thrown onto and the rest your putter, or was on the rest where depending on machlekes Rabbi Yochanan Shlaker, you're going to isha mishum chitzav or mishum amayne. Be that as it may, you're chayiv chatzi nezik for the pile of grain. Who is it that's chayiv? Says the Gemara, Bal Kelev, the owner of the dog. Right, the dog is the one that brought this hot biscuit with the coals onto the pile of grain, and he's the one that's chayiv. Flek the Gemara, v'lechayiv namin bal gecheles. Wait a second. The owner of the coal should be liable because, as Rashi points out, whether you hold Rabbi Yochanan or Rish Lakish, they both agree that Ishai, Even if you hold Mishum Chitzav, everyone ultimately agrees that there's also an element of Mamayne. So according to Rabbi Yochanan that he previously said, that on the pile of grain you're going to pay Chatzi Nezik because it's Shrai. So the question is, let the owner of the coal pay the other half because it's his mammon that's mazik. And according to Shlakish that he said that on the pile of grain, the owner of the dog is totally potter. It's only on where it threw it down that you're going to be chayiv Chatzi Nezik. Let the owner of the coal pay the entire amount. Because, as Rashi points out, the Gemara assumes right now that the biscuit and the coal is owned by one person, and the pile of grain is someone else's. So the question is, why don't the owner of the coal have to pay the remaining amount? Says the Gemara, no, the owner of the coal, the guy who made the barbecue, he had his doors locked, and there was an einus that some dog came in, the neighborhood dog came in and grabbed away a coal, a hot biscuit from the grill, and blew up his neighbor's yard. Says the Gemara, wait a second. If it's talking about where he had protected his coal, my boy Kelavasim, how did the dog get in? Who let the dogs out? Right? They shouldn't be getting. There's no way that they're in over here. Says the Gemara, Bishachasa. We're talking about where he dug his way in. Oh, says the Gemara, really? That's how he got in? He says, this tells us from the fact that you're telling me that the owner of the dog is going to be chayiv for the biscuit nezek shalim. Obviously, it's not abnormal that the dog dug his way under the door to get into your barbecue to eat that biscuit. And therefore, that tells us, Stam Delasa, is that in general, doors, chaturas and ezel kelev, are considered diggable for dogs. In other words, don't say it's mishuna, abnormal, and be chatzi nezek to pay because of keren. So the Gemara wants to infer that halacha from this idea that that you could see that it must be considered normal. There's a whole discussion regarding tchalas b'pshir, sebainis, b'akapanim. That's what the Gemara wants to infer. But then the Gemara says, wait a second. Wait, the achla heicha. Where did the dog eat this biscuit? If it ate it in just another party's grain, why would you pay for the biscuit? But it's Shane. We need to have that the eating of the biscuit is in the victim's property. But you don't have that. The biscuit was eaten on the pile of grain of the owner of the coal. So that actually answers our original question that we wanted to say, hey, why doesn't the owner of the coal be liable for the pile of the grain? But what do you mean? It is his pile of grain. That's the only way you'd be chayiv for the eating of the biscuit is because it has to be eaten b'shus hanizik in the victim's property. But then says the Gemara, so tifshid, so you can resolve from the fact that you're telling me that the dog having eaten the biscuit, that from that halacha, you could resolve the pipara, that the mouth of the cow, of the mazik that eats it in the victim's property, as it continues to midbeis, must be kechatzer nizik dami. It is like it's in the victim's property, and you call it stei acher, that it was beer b'stei acher. Because the ikar chatzer mazik dami, if you would think to say that the mouth of the cow is like the mazik's property, because it's the mouth of his animal, lei malay, he could tell him, my boy riftach bepuma de kalboy. What's your bread doing in the mouth of my cow? Which is interesting. Tais discusses this, but in a simple way, it basically saying is, when something's in the mazik's rishus, you can say torcha b'rishus my boy. What's your ox doing in my property? So I understand over here that the dog took it, but ultimately, at the end of the day, the liability is for the damage that it's doing in its own mouth. When it's in the mouth, it didn't do damage yet. When it starts chomping away, it's doing damage. So if it's b'shus hamazik, we know you're not chayiv b'shus hamazik. So he could say, hey, what's your bread doing in my dog's mouth? The fact that the Mishnah is telling us that you're going to be chayiv nezik shalom when the dog eats the biscuit in the rishus hanizik, that the mouth of the mazik is not b'shus hamazik, it's considered b'shus hanizik. Because the Gemara says, they actually asked this as a question. The question was posed, pi para, the mouth of the cow, right? He walks into someone's property. Do we say his mouth is like the victim's property, or maybe you would say it's like the mazik's property? His mouth, we've said this before, we said that the animal in Rishus Harabim, the back of the animal is Rishus HaNizik. So maybe the mouth of the animal is gufa, the Rishus of the mazik. So now the Gemara responds and says, wait a second. Why? Keep in mind, we just answered this question. But the Gemara is jumping in now and saying, hey, why do you have a question? I could prove that it's like a chatzah nizik dummy. Why? Because if you think to say that it's like the mazik's chatzah, however are you going to be chayiv, which interesting point the Gemara is bringing up, the mazik of shein. You're telling me that shein is only chayiv of bir b'stei acher in the rishus of the nizik. The lomdus, you're getting falumdivit over here. The hezik's happening, his teeth are only chomping away in his mouth. His mouth is the rishus of mazik. So whenever, pray tell, are you ever going to have a chiyav mazik of shein b'shus hanizik? So Amar Rab Mari Bered of Khan, this is not true. I could find you a case. When the animal rubs itself against the wall for its pleasure, which is a tilad of shein, you're right, says Rashi. Literal shein itself, you would never be able to have. Because he would always say that the mouth of my cow is my rishus. But you could have cases of a tilad of shein, when it rubs its back on the wall and smashes the wall, or if a tinfa peiris la'nas rolls around in the peiris for its pleasure by rolling around like the horses and the donkeys do, and therefore that wouldn't be in the rishus of the mazik. That would be the animal getting pleasure, ruining something, rishus of the nizik. So that's not a raya. But Mazudra asks, he says, wait a second, it still wouldn't make sense. Because we need to have that the mazik of shein is kasher yavar hagol atumoy, until it destroys it in totality. What's called machal yakarna, it destroys the principle. Now, this pasuk that says kasher yavar, where do we know shein from the Torah? It says ubir b'stei acher. Ubir is shein. So, like the pasuk says, yavar hagol has to be atumoy, which the Gemara learned out in the Beis Mabez referring to shein. Now, Valeka, here you don't have tumai because the stone, the peiros are still here. When you eat something and you're the Ava Mazik of Shein, that's Kashiyavar Hagal Tumai, because it's totally destroying it. You have no zecher of it whatsoever. But here you have the stones, you have the peiros, it's just ruined. How could you say that that's Ubir B'stei Acher? Rabbi Nama says that's not difficult because actually Deshav Talmi, you could say that when it rubbed itself against the wall, it erased a figurine or figure that's on it, that's totally erasing it. That would be Yivar Atumai, or Rav Shloimy says the Pasi Pasui. You could have when it rolled around on the peiros, it smashed it into the mud, and you cannot even gather it out anymore. It's totally destroyed. So you could have cases of the Tilad of Shein. There would be Kashiva Agal Atumai. So again, it's not a raya. So the Gemara says, Tashma, let's try to bring another raya from Mishnah Masechet Sanhedrin. Again, we already brought a raya, but the Gemara is attempting on its own to say, hey, we could prove it's Kachatza Nizik Dami. The Mishnah Sanhedrin says, Shisa B'Yasakelav. If, let's say, someone is inciting a dog to bite someone, or shisa b'is nachash, or he's inciting a snake to bite someone, so pater, the one who's doing this inciting is exempt. Now, says the Gemara, man pater, as the Gemara is explaining, meshasa pater, who's the one that we're saying is exempt? The one who's inciting is exempt, like Rashi says, because we know the classic halacha, grama b'nizakin is pater. Yes, obviously you're causing it, but it's indirect cause. And indirect cause by damages, one is going to be exempt, as the Gemara says later in the Samach Manaf. But it sounds like a chayiv bal kelev. The one who's inciting the dog to bite is going to be exempt, but the owner of the dog is going to be liable. Now, if you say that the mouth of the dog is like the mazik's property, he can tell him, "My boy boy, what's your hand doing in my dog's mouth?" Again, obviously it's funny because the dog is putting its mouth on the person's hand. But ultimately, and that's what Tay's discussed at length, but ultimately it's in the damage happened to my property, right? You should have taken your hand out of the property, whatever it is, but in my property damage happening, you're part of b'shus hamazik. So why am I going to be chayiv? So it says the Gemara, Amy, you should say pater af meshasa. You're right. It's not true. Actually, I could tell you that not only would the inciter be exempt, but the owner of the dog would also be exempt because we would say that it's considered as the shus of the mazik. Or if you want to say the afke lenive, interesting, says the Gemara, it stuck out its teeth, its fangs, visarte, and dug it into the person's flesh, where the hand was never in his mouth. So it was not b'shus hamazik. It was actually b'shus hanizik. So that would be another approach to answer the question why it's not difficult, that you could say that maybe pi para, pi kalef is kashus amazik, and still the halacha would not be a contradiction. One says, okay, Tashma, try to bring another raya. The Mishnah Sanhedrin says further over there, hishach bayas hanachash. So these are two different terminologies that Tais discusses. Shisa and hishach. But upon him, it's a similar type of idea where he took the snake in his hand, and he brought the snake's mouth to his friend's hand until the guy's hand was inside the snake's mouth, and the snake bit him, and the guy died. Rabbi Yehuda holds the one who did this is liable for the death penalty. The sages say no, he's going to be exempt. Now, when you could say, you'll say like this. The Rabbi Yehuda that comes out, according to Rabbi Yehuda, you have to say, Eres nochash, the venom of the snake, bein shinav hu oimid. It's like standing between the teeth. Meaning, what does that primarily mean to say? Like Rashi says, without the intent of the snake, the venom comes out. So the snake is your sword, basically. When you put the snake onto the person, you like stabbed him, you killed him, because the venom is there. Lafikach, therefore, Makish, the one who did the inciting, Besayif, he's going to get the death penalty of being beheaded, because like he's like literally killed a guy with a knife. It's not a gairim. You don't say the gun, the knife is the grama. You use it to kill. The owner of the snake is going to be exempt. But according to the words of the sages, no. Eres nachash, the venom of the snake, he has to willingly emit the venom. Oh, therefore, nachash peskila. The owner of the snake is going to get stoned to death like an ox that kills a person, like it says Hasher Yisakal, umakish pater, and that's why the one who is bringing the snake to the guy's hand is going to be exempt, because you didn't kill the guy. You brought the snake to the water, and you brought him to the person's hand, but you can't force him to drink. He decides to emit the venom. Oh, okay, that's the machlekes. So says the Gemara, you're going to say pipara, that the mouth of the cow is kachatz mazik, dummy is like the domain of the mazik. Wait a second. Lay malay, why can't he tell him my boy yadcha b'pamoy dechavai? Meaning, according to what we're explaining, according to the Chacham, that they hold the person is going to be exempt, but the owner of the snake is going to be chayav. Meaning the snake has to be stoned to death because the snake killed the person, not the person who held the snake. Wait a second, but where did he kill the person? Inside his mouth. Wait a second, inside his mouth of Rishus of the Mazik. What's your hand doing in my property? You can't have my animal killed because you came into my property. My pit bull went and ate up your whatever, some human being. Says Gemara, no, that's not a difficulty, because in Kitala, regarding killing the snake, we don't say the sva my bayatcha b'shusai. What's your hand doing in my property? And as Rashi explains, even if you would hold that the mouth of the animal is like the chatz of the mazik, he would not be pater, rather he would be executed. But regarding damages, regarding the zaken, I would say my boy b'shusi, what's it doing in my property? As the Mishnah told in the first paragraph of Testament Beis, that we say you're not liable for shusam yuchadis lamazik for the mazik's private property, and therefore we have a question: Pi para, is it like the chatz mazik or not? Until we had resolved from the Amud Aleph what we had said from the case of a Mishnah, Kelev Shanat Charara, which we proved that obviously that it must be like a chatzah nizik, because or else why would the dog be chayiv for eating the biscuit? But the damage was being done to Rishus HaMazik. Rishus HaMazik is not chayiv. Obviously, it is Rishus HaNizik. But the Gemara said, because we had asked this question, we had attempted to answer, we couldn't find an answer, but from our Mishnah would be a raya. Now it says the Gemara, not tamer, but how do you know that there's a difference? That we don't say the svara of turcha b'shasi my boy. We don't say yadcha, this whatever it is that in my rishus, that what's it doing that we don't say that svara regarding killing the animal. Kind of like learn the brisa. If someone goes into the courtyard of a homeowner without permission, a private property, trespassed. The nokri shabalabai maze, and then the guy walked in someone else's private property. The guy has a wild ox, killed the host, killed his ox, killed this person, this trespass, and he died. Halacha is asher beskila. The ox gets stoned to death, which is the halacha written in the Torah. But the owner is exempt from paying the atonement money when his ox kills a person. So why? Why is the owner exempt from paying the kaifer? Because the says, "Bishus in my place. What were you doing here on my private property? I got these wild animals. I got shotguns. I got all these different things. You don't belong over here." Well, then sharinami lemalei. Then wait for why does his ox getting stoned to death? He should say, "My bais bishus. What are you doing with my property?" Allah says the Gemara. This proves the idea that we said regarding killing the animal that we don't say the svar of tucha bishus in my boy, yatra bishus in my boy, pitoi bishus in my boy. That we don't say, and we would be liable for the killing of the animal. The Gemara brings a story regarding dangerous animals, as we were just talking about. Hanu easy to Beit Tarbu. There were these goats of this family Beit Tarbu. They were causing a loss to Rabbi Yosef. These goats were always coming and chomping on his nice chamomile plants or whatever he had over there. Amalei Abaya said it to his Talmud Rabbi Abaya, Zil imelu l'manai, go tell the owners of these goats that they should hide them away, which as we'll see in a second, that specifically said that they should put them away. They don't have to kill them. But Amalei said to him, Amay Ezel, why should I go and tell them? If I'm going to go, Amrli, they're going to tell me, no, you should make a wall. You should make a fence. We're not responsible for our goats. But says the Gemara, wait a second. If you're telling me that it's the responsibility of the Nizik, that he has to make a fence, how are you ever going to have a mazik of Shein in the Torah? You tell me a guy, his animal eats Shein, he's going to be chayiv. Why should he be chayiv? But if you would have made a wall, my animal wouldn't have eaten. Says the Gemara, it's not true. The reason why, maybe Taka is responsible to make a wall. But we're saying that the matzik's animal is going to be chayiv when it dug under the wall and trespassed. Well, you could say the nafal good belayla. It could be in the case when, no, of course you have to make a wall, but if the wall fell in the middle of the night, then it's not the negligence of the owner, of the victim, because it fell during the night, and then the animal came. That's where we're going to be chayiv the mazik of Shein. But that's what I said. I'm not going to go tell them because they're going to tell me, just go and build your own wall. Which the Tosfos brings in the Rift, that's not true. We don't paskin like that. We don't say it's the victim who gets blamed and says, well, if you wouldn't, you would take precautions, you can't blame me. No, your animal is a mazik, and you have to watch your animal. Now the Gemara says, related, that Machras Rabbi Yosef. Rabbi Yosef made an announcement, Vitem Rabbah, or some say it was Rabbah, that relating to this idea, the Sulkin La'ela, those who go up from Babel to Eretz Yisrael, or the Nachsin L'Tachta, or those who come down from Etzal to Bavel, I guess Olam V'Yardim, like this week's parasha, and that they're well versed in this halacha. Hani Izu de Shuka, these goats of the marketplace, of the butchers, which are meant to be slaughtered. It's just that they leave them until the market day. The mafsadi that cause other people loss because these wild goats that they're waiting to slaughter them, but in the meantime they're just running around town and eating up people's stuff. Masrina b'marayu, we warn their owner if it's causing a loss, even if the loss is happening with Rishus Rabbim, which really goats are exempt Rishus Rabbim. We warn them today with losses, them 2-3 times. It's size if they listen. If not, Amran, we tell him, Tiv Amsachta, sit on the place of where the butchers stand, for Kabul Zuzach, and get your money, even on a day that's not the market day. You have to go out and slaughter it, because since ultimately it's meant to be slaughtered and it's causing damage, you're not allowed to wait for the market day, which Taisa points out, that's specifically by goats that are going to be slaughtered. So even though they're going to pay for the damage that their goats do, we don't have to go ahead and litigate with them, and because sometimes there's no witnesses, and therefore we tell them you have to slaughter it. But let's say if someone has a goat for the milk or a sheep for its shearings of wool, then we could say that no, when the damages will pay, as we find by the goats of Beit Tarba that we said before. He says zil atzne inu, he didn't say zil shachtinu, because it's not meant for shchita. But if it's meant for shchita, then go ahead and do it right now because it's causing damage. Now look at the next Mishnah, which is continuing from the first parak, as we mentioned, opening Mishnah of this parak, Ketz the Regel. So we were speaking about Shein and Regel, and this whole continuation of the last Mishnah of Tezvav and Abayz, that we were talking about the different mazikin. So we go back to the mazik of Keren. Ezehu tam be'ezeh muhud. Says the Mishnah, what's considered tam and what's considered as a muhud. So it says the Mishnah, muhud is kol she'idu b'shleisha yom. If you warn the ox for 3 days, and it has continued to gore, then it becomes a mood. What's betam? What makes it into a tam? If it retracted for 3 days, meaning it saw oxen for 3 days and did not gore, it goes back to be considered as a tam. That's the Rabbi Huda. Rabbi says no. Mood is shahidu b'shleisha pa'amim, not 3 days. That you warned it 3 times, even in 1 day. But tam, what makes it into a tam is koshia tinugis memashmashim b'en negech. The kids fool around with the ox and it doesn't gore. That's like it went back to its innocence. It's not this wild, dangerous ox anymore. Says the Gemara, my time of Rabbi Yehuda. What's the reason of Rabbi Yehuda that he says that the halacha of mood is after 3 days? So Abaye says it's based on the pasuk in Shemais. The pasuk says, it says over there, or you're going to find out kisher nagachu. It's a goring ox. It doesn't say this word tamol. It says mitmol, but mitmol has 2 words in it. It has tamol and with extra mem making a mitmol, so which means yesterday, but an added level of the yesterday, and shulshaim, which is the 3rd time. And the owner didn't watch it, he has to pay shar techas ashar. Okay, so tmol would be chad, would be 1 day, meaning yesterday. Mitmol means from yesterday, which means another day. Today would be before yesterday. Shulshaim would be 3, that's plus, so that's 3. And it says, 3 times didn't watch. And the owner didn't watch it. That brings us to the 4th goring. That if the owner didn't watch and they gored a 4th time, that's when the pasuk is telling you have to pay min aliyah nezik shalom. But the 3rd time, you're only going to make chatzi nezik. Rav Amma, he says no. Tmol mitmol chad. That's one thing. It's not 2 different things. It says 1 word mitmol. Shulshaim is today is 2. And you don't watch it now, meaning by the 3rd goring, then you can be chayiv on that nezik shalom. Is that we have this machlokes regarding this halacha. Is it going to be the halacha of the mu'id on the 3rd time, or is it going to be on the 4th time as a machlokes between Abaye and Rava? Thank you anytime.